Hello everyone, welcome back to Silly Reads. I want to give a huge shout out to those who are in the Paranormal Encounters subreddit. Without them, I would not be able to make these videos. If you wish to support me further, please like the videos and subscribe to my channel, as well as hit the notification bell so you'll be kept in a loop of when I upload videos. If you have a story you'd like to submit, please send me an email. That information will be in the description box. Alright, thank you so much. Let's go. Back in Halloween of 2015, I was at my cousin's house. I was 7 at the time and still played with Barbies. I was in the room when my cousin got annoyed at me, so she turned the light off and started to close the door. All of a sudden, one Barbie went from having its head facing forward to its head facing me. I ran out the room, and later on, when my mom came in, the doll still had its head turned, and I tried to tell her that it was facing forwards, then turned its head. But she didn't believe me and thought it was just a trick of the light. In the shadow. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. Its history had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were arguing. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There were a bedroom and a living room on one side, then a bathroom with 2 entrances. On the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows on one side and 2 bedrooms on the other. I could look across the hall into the bathroom from my bedroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser, and I just noticed movement out the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. That's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid, just like WTF. Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it just came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went outside into the daylight and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. When I was 13, I woke up one night being strangled. When I opened my eyes, I saw a mask that looked like it would be used in a native ritual. One of the ghosts that follows me stabs the one strangling me with enough force to make them fly into my dresser. After that, I started trying to catch my breath as the other 4 gathered around me. The one that stabbed the ghost that was strangling me continued to attack. While I was trying to catch my breath, one of the other 4 put their hand on my head, and I almost instantly fell back asleep. When I woke up, I was confused and thought I had had a bad dream and started getting ready for school. When I was doing my hair, I noticed bruises on my neck. They looked like fingerprints. I didn't want to worry my family or teachers, so I covered it with my hair. Luckily, it was far back enough on the sides of my neck that they could easily be covered. I haven't had another experience with being attacked at home since then. I have lived my whole life suffering from deja vu. I always see things which will happen in the future in my dreams, which makes it hard to sleep. A few examples. I once dreamed about a car accident I was in, and the number 145 was everywhere in it. About a week later, I had a feeling like today is the day of the car accident. I was driving normally and then was sideswiped by someone trying to merge at a mile marker 144.5 on the highway. I was so scared of dreaming after that day. I once dreamed of my high school having to evacuate for some reason, and everyone was in a panic, but it was funny because everyone was in costumes. 3 days later, my high school had a bomb threat on Halloween. I have even had job interviews in my dreams. Most recent example from my current in a dream I had interviewing for it. The woman when was conducting the interview said her son was an employee at Chipotle, where I also got my first job, and we discussed. In the actual interview, I talked about how I learned good time management in my Chipotle days. The woman conducting me says, "How strange, my son works there right now," and says the same thing. There are plenty of other examples too. I use my dreams to my advantage and always feel like I know what is going to happen, but it still scares. Is there any way to stop this from happening? I've tried so many times. I try to sleep in weird positions, set alarms so only I sleep for 4 hours at a time, and even just praying I don't have another dream. But it still happens. To surprising details too. I always freak out regarding it. What can I do to stop it? What causes this? Does anyone know? I lived in a peaceful and green world until a scientist asked me to participate in an experiment. I was broke, and he offered me $5,000 for a 2-week study, and that was 5 years ago. Let me start from the beginning. My childhood was like any other, spending days at school and evenings playing with my friends. One day, I noticed a man in a white coat watching me. When I told my parents, they put me in the car and we moved. We never even got our stuff, just what we were wearing. We never talked about it again. About 10 years later, I was off to college. I won't make the university, as it evidently exists here too. One spring day, I was headed across campus to my next class when I saw the same man in a white coat from so many years ago. I dismissed it as my mind playing tricks on me and continued to class. The rest of the afternoon was pretty normal. Around 3 a.m., there was a knock at my dorm door. I was startled awake and angrily opened the door, only to find an envelope with my name on it printed in a fancy font. Confused, I picked it up and looked down the hall both ways. It was totally deserted. Upon opening the envelope, I found a single brass key, similar to a skeleton key. The top of the key had a face, wherein the eyes were 2 small glowing red stones. I set the key down on the counter and looked into the envelope. I found a small scrap of paper that said 2:45 a.m. tomorrow, room 452, and the name of the abandoned science building on campus. I dropped the note next to the key and went back to bed. The next morning, I thought it was just a dream as my alarm woke me up from a deep sleep, but when I looked over at the counter, there was the key and note. I went and asked at the admin office if there was a new project going on in that building, and they literally laughed at me. No one has set foot in there in more than 30 years. It's finally scheduled to be torn down Monday. I felt very confused. I asked all my friends which of them had tried such a lame joke, but none of them admitted it. My best friend, almost like a brother to me, I'll call him Joe here, said, "What would it hurt to go check it out? I'll go with you. It can be fun. I've always wanted to see the inside." At 2:30 a.m., we met outside the dark and sagging building. I said to Joe, "Could this place be any creepier?" He laughed and pulled out a flashlight. "We better get going. Don't want to be late." As we stepped inside and Joe shone his light all around, we saw debris all around covering in a thick layer of dust. The air smelled stagnant or stale. We noticed what looked like a path through the mess, so we followed it to a staircase that looked brand new, shiny and polished. This must be the way up. I bet they just cleaned up what they needed to get to their lab. Joe sounded just the tiniest bit nervous. We reached the top of the stairs that seemed a mile long and saw a room at the end of the hall with a strange green light emanating around it and glowing orange numbers 452. The entire hallway was empty. No dust or debris, just a long, straight hall leading to the door. Joe rushed ahead and grabbed the knob. It squeaked as it turned, and he flung the door open, flooding the hall in a beautiful but strange green light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He immediately stepped through the door and motioned for me to follow. I looked into the room and saw what looked like a lab of some kind. There were metal tables and 2 stools at each, a large white board with writing covering one entire wall, and big white double doors with rectangular metal plates about halfway up them, but no one in this room. As I looked at the whiteboard, I didn't understand anything written on it. I guess it was scientific formulas. Joe whispered, "Hey, I hear someone in there," pointing at the double doors. As I stepped closer, I could hear several voices and a humming noise. "That must be where everyone is. Let's go," I told Joe. We pushed through the double doors side by side and saw a team of people working, adjusting dials and switches, when an older man with thin gray hair turned and said, "Ha, I told you all he would come, and he brought a friend too. How very thoughtful." I introduced myself and Joe. The gray-haired man said his name was Tim, and I was invited to this experiment. He claimed to be able to teleport people or objects from one place to another, like some sci-fi show. He called back to another person wearing a white coat, that when he looked up to reply, I noticed it was the same man I saw when I was a kid and earlier that week on campus. Tim said he was his assistant and that we would not have to communicate with him. His name was unimportant. He went on to explain that they had already tested their machine using a variety of animals and everyday objects with stellar success. "We are prepared to offer you each $5,000 cash right now to participate." We talked for a while, and then he said, "Well, everything is ready. Let's begin. Which of you would like to go first?" Joe jumped up. "I'll go first. Where do I sit?" Tim opened a large heavy metal door with a wheel on it, kind of like a safe in the movies, to reveal a metallic cylinder-shaped room, all smooth and polished, and no other entrances or exits. Just a camera in one corner and set into the wall and behind a window. As Tim strapped Joe into the cold chair, Joe asked, "What does it feel like to be teleported?" "You tell us," was Tim's reply. Tim closed the door and spun the wheel till we all heard it lock with a loud clank. "Okay, cameras rolling, status all stations." A series of green across the board was called out from several stations surrounding the chamber that housed the room now was sealed in. "Transfer sequence in 3, 2, 1, now." Tim slammed his hand down on a large red button I hadn't noticed before, and the whole room got so bright, all I could see was light. Then just as quickly, the room went black. A few seconds later, the green light returned, and Joe was turning the wheel on the door already as it swung open, now was gone. Tim laughed with excitement. "Where the hell is Joe?" I screamed. Just then Joe walked in through the double door smiling. "What a rush, you gotta try it." I sat in the now warm metal chair as Tim strapped me in. Joe just stood watching, smiling, and going on about how his whole body felt energized. Tim looked at me in the eyes and said, "Just relax and enjoy the ride. You and Joe are both going to go down in history." He stepped out and closed the heavy door. I heard the loud clank of the door locking, then the light flickered and quickly brightened, so again all I could see was light. An almost electric feeling started in my toes and spread slowly to cover my entire body. As it spread to my eyes, everything went black. After what seemed like a very long time, my eyes adjusted to the dark room I was now sitting in. I realized I wasn't strapped down anymore, and there was a blue wooden door on the opposite wall. Otherwise, the room was empty. I opened the door and found a short hallway that led to a metal door. I pushed it open and stepped through into another hallway covered in debris and dust. To my left was the familiar polished stairs that we climbed to get to the lab. Again I climbed them, but when I got to the top, it was deserted. I pulled out my phone for light and could make out the numbers 452 on the door, a few feet in front of me. I rushed to it, starting to feel uneasy. As I pushed the door, it seemed like something was blocking it, so I pushed a little harder, and the door opened. Inside, I saw what looked like a lab, but it clearly hadn't been used in many, many years. Now starting to worry, I ran to the double doors and pushed through them. What I saw, I will never forget. In one corner was sitting a wet red mess. In the opposite corner was the man in the white lab coat, frozen in terror, a yellow notepad in his lap with the words, "This isn't home, no way back," written over and over. On the cardboard back of it said, "Sorry, Joe, I hope it didn't hurt." I turned around and saw a crude cross laid on a red mess, and my heart dropped. I slowly stepped over to it and pulled back the soaked cloth covering it. I screamed out loud and ripped the cloth off. When I saw Joe's face, I vomited when I saw the rest of him. It was like he had been turned inside out. I started running out of the room as fast as I could. I jumped down the stairs and ran out the door we came in and kept running straight for campus police. I was even more confused when they told me the building had been torn down 5 years prior. I clearly had been there just minutes ago. They drove me back to where I had come from, and all that was there was an empty space and a sign, future site of X Hall Dormitory. The campus police took me to the hospital, saying I was hysterical. I'm sure I was. After spending a few days in the hospital, I was released. I went back to my dorm, but a pair of girls were in my room, and all my things were gone. I went to the administration office and asked about my dorm and where my stuff went. The secretary couldn't find any record of me having a dorm room or even being registered for classes. Now really scared, I called home. The number was disconnected. I tried 4 times, thinking maybe I misdialed. I decided to go to the library to use a computer and look up the number. I tried to sign into one, but it told me my library card wasn't valid. So after getting a temp card, I googled my mom's name and found out that both my parents were killed in a car crash 4 years before I was born.